I've always been interested in Albania as a country since I was a very young child. Because I've always been interested in what it means to be isolated and what it means to be part of a place that you cannot go outside, and what it means to be part of a place that is against the world. When Stalin died against the USSR, when Mao died against China, against Yugoslavia with Tito, against the Western countries, and suddenly, what it means for an individual to be part of this. Being a small country, and it's a country then that has a huge crisis, as you know, in the 90s, and then became such an example for many other things. And I always dream about going there and traveling there and discovering this country.
Well, we meet Eddie. I met in Hotel Atlanta in Rotterdam for dinner. After a lecture I gave at the Berlage. So it can be 2003, it's in 2002. I have to look at it. And then he said, but you never dare to come to Albania. So then 3 weeks later I was there. It was a big mess. And there were things happening. It was energetic. There was a beautiful coffee culture on the terraces. And they have glimpses of beautiful landscapes, insanely, and again the energy. Then there was meetings with many friends and people, and talking directly about not only architecture but also about what the state should be. How do you deal with housing? How do you deal with the occupied lands? Say the non-ownership of the land. And then Eddie immediately asked, how would you solve this? And I said, I'm an architect. Interesting. But that illustrates, I think, the variety of quests and tasks to be done, from cleaning to organizing property, to developing economy, and how could architecture take a role in that?
Não, foi emocionante ver um país a nascer, um novo país a nascer. Portanto, é como ver uma criança a crescer, neste caso a crescer. E imaginar as oportunidades que podem acontecer no futuro, não correndo os erros que já foram feitos nas outras cidades.
Vienna, Berlin, Paris are like really looking to hold on to something. They're like desperately holding on to something. And Albania is about a new idea.
Instead of going to the past and only to the past and being nostalgic about what was before, we feel that we're building the future right now all together, and that the future of Albania and Tirana will be definitely different from what we see today.
It's appealing because there's a need. It's not like a country that has so much wealth that they just want to park their money somewhere in architecture and use architecture like just as some kind of glitzy marketing thing. So I really feel that here there's a genuine need for building the cities, and so that's really exciting.
And, it's the fastest growing economy, and when we think about Europe and all the economies that are closing down and all of the governments that are where there's tremendous pessimism, among the public, this is just a very, very different place.
And the more now that I know it a little bit, like just the idea that you can also raise money that way. For like the whole system, I've come to understand that the whole system is partly about housing, but it's partly about like Eddie bringing money into Albania, right? It's about taking, right? That's really what it's about. right? He loves architecture, and he's combined something he loves with something that brings money for the state, which is really important. And I generally believe in the state, and I believe in Eddie's socialist position. And at first it seems like a crazy neoliberal thing, but it's not. It's like that our clients have to pay tax. We're here because they have to pay 12% tax when they get a building permit on the actual selling price of a building that hasn't even been drawn up properly. That, for example, in Switzerland, you pay like less than 1% until it's done. They are raising money. They are taking outside investment and turning it into state to fund the state. And that's really, really simple and really, really smart thing to do. And that if you think about it that way, it on the one hand sounds insane and risky. And it is insane and risky, right? Like urbanistically, we don't really, I don't know what these 64 projects are going to do. You could argue like, hey, we should build the roads first and the buildings later. But if the buildings are paying for the roads, right? So I think in the end, surely there'll be some ugly things and some urbanistic situations that won't work out. And I hope that I'm not party to those. But I think in the end, it'll be a rich city, and it'll be a city like no other city.
Let's go slightly backwards, and that's how I see how this operation works. That is maybe not that different from concessions. I mean, private concessions for infrastructure, for example, in developing countries. Poor countries don't have the money to do everything they need to do in terms of ports, highways, hospitals, jails, desalination plants, you call it, you name it. So they create conditions for a private company within the set of rules that the state provides to operate whatever that work is, so that the government can do investments that otherwise could have not done with their own annual budget. The Prime Minister vision that wants to create that big picture in which, not having the public money, he has seen the private resources, not just from investors from Europe, but also from the Albanian diaspora. So Albanians that may want to come back, that do have funding and resources, but then if you just bring it just like that, it will be a missed opportunity. So, okay, how do we create the win-win situation?
And then there is something also that doesn't exist anymore in Western Europe for us. It's that politics is deciding what should be going on, which means that we are not in the end of developers, and we are in the end of the architecture, the politic, and then we try to impose our ideas to the developers. So the relationship between, in a way, capitalism and politics is completely different from the one that we're used to. And this is also something that means that the architecture is really in the center of the process. And it means that the ideas are more important than only the profits and the market laws.
And that's what differentiates Eddie Rama, maybe from other politicians, is that he's an artist. So he gets it. He's not that different from the people that are, collaborating on making the architectural work. So there's he's in a sense there's a kind of curatorial strategy that that the Prime Minister brings, and that's public space and city first, civic consciousness above all.
When we have a client in let's say Frankfurt who wants to build a high rise, the greed is definitely the same and more for square meters. But the political backup you have and support you have to counteract that and tell the client we need a two-story lobby without any profitability for you, and have someone political political stand behind you and say, yes, we do it, you don't have in Frankfurt. Just not. The politicians side with the bankers in Frankfurt, and you will have a 3-meter lobby. And in Tirana, you have a prime minister who gives you support and saying we have a 6-meter lobby. So I think that actually, in that sense, the pressure that we feel from private clients is just the same everywhere in the world. But the question is how much political alliance we have in counteracting that. And here, I have to say the curatorial model, once again, is stronger than the market model, where democracy just somehow goes with the biggest forces in the market.
And yeah, I think the whole dynamic is just very interesting and unusual. I've never worked in quite the same framework before, where you have a client, but then you also have a person like Edi Rama being essentially the kind of driving force who sort of makes the developers choose certain architects as a condition of building a certain size on the sites that are available. And so you have to both win Edi Rama over with a design that he emphasizes a lot the link or some kind of connection to Albania and the site, and then versus a developer, well, not versus necessarily, but of course they have their own set of criteria and requests and concerns, cost and all that.
And I think this is a little bit where Edi kind of also a bit underestimates the position we are in, or overestimates maybe the power we have. Every architect has to follow his client. You cannot fundamentally oppose your client. So I think it's asked a little bit too much that we take that upon our shoulders, this whole fight between public interest and private interest, because we're not a neutral. Yeah, we're being paid by the private interest. So there's just a lot of force pushing us into a certain direction, and it's very hard to stand against that if there is no master plan or something supporting you. And this seems to be changing now again. So I said hey, but you have a plan. How difficult is it to just follow the plan?
Yes, and let's say the regulations are also sometimes it's a question, where do they come from, right? They are partly not necessary at all, I mean, this process of first making a master plan and then every architect is obliged to take a volume that is already defined and can just work on the facades because the interior is already also defined, brings back architecture to the 19th century. And I think here it's also much more straightforward and efficient, You do the whole thing in one go. You make a design, and the design is the master plan. I think this is also the exciting idea of having this development permit. You could also call it master plan, but it's by the same author.